Today's guest, y'all, is Adam Boyd. Adam is the founder of the Northwood Group. And Adam brings to us a lot of insights in regards to how to develop an excellent sales function in your business. I know that many of our listeners are figuring out how do they remove themselves from being the top salesperson in their organization, and how can they begin to delegate that out with success. And Adam brings a ton of insight into how to make that happen. So I'm really excited to have Adam on as a guest today, and you're going to get a lot of action-packed advice from him. But just want to give a quick shout out. We recorded this episode with Adam under our old podcast name, Accelerating Lower Middle Market Value. A little long and a little boring, right? And we decided to rebrand to Brewing Business with Brady. One, because fact is I'm a coffee nut, that I drink lots of coffee throughout the day, and most people will find me with a coffee cup in my hand at some point and interacting with me. And so, we decided to rebrand. We felt like it was a little bit more relatable and fun for our audience. Something boring that does everybody even understand what the lower middle market is? And so, we decided to rebrand, but the fact is the insights and advice that you're going to get from Adam in this episode are action-packed. And so never mind any reference to the old title. Instead, just enjoy and soak in what Adam has to teach us today. Appreciate y'all. Thanks. Adam is going to tell us all about his company, Northwood Group, and how they coach, they train, and they develop sales systems within organizations. We are so excited to have him. Adam is joining us with nearly 2 decades of experience in sales strategy and training. He has helped hundreds of companies simplify and scale their sales processes. We are excited to dive into the world of sales with Adam today.
Hey, Mason, it's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about this, and really just looking forward to having a conversation with you.
Awesome. Yeah, well, let's dive into it. So I think for the audience, it's always important. We want to understand your personal journey, that obviously you've been working in sales for 20 plus years, that you have all of this experience, and you founded this organization called Northwood Group. And we would love to understand more about that journey and how you came to founding Northwood Group, and what you're doing today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And this will resonate with some, and it won't fit the standard narrative for others. I was in business school, which you sometimes do to delay making any decisions. And I thought I would spend business school figuring out what I was going to do next, but I was so busy trying to understand finance and valuations that I just said, I've got to finish school and then I'll figure everything out. I ended up looking around for a role, most likely in sales. I had a lot of classmates who encouraged me to go that path. And I don't know if that was because they thought I wasn't smart enough, or if they're like, yeah, you have a decent enough personality, which is typically what happens for people. They're like,
Decent.
You seem good to people, go sell.
Yeah.
So I was going through the interview process, and there was something in the back of my mind where I knew there was a guy I needed to talk to. He had come and he had spoken at our school, and he had sold a company, and he was really working with companies now on sales. He was doing some consulting and some investing. And I sat down with this guy, and he ran me through an assessment, and he interviewed me a little bit. And he said, look, what I do in having to sell and then consult, he's like, it's going to be really hard for you, especially the selling piece. It's going to be as difficult as becoming a doctor or lawyer. He said, you probably don't want to do this. And because I'm a masochist, I was like, no, I can do it. Yeah. And I remember, I'm interviewing for jobs. I got an MBA, but I ended up going to work for this guy. I think I was making $15 an hour with an MBA. And he said, for if you hit certain targets or if you sell certain things, I'll give you these kickers. But I sat in a windowless room and made cold calls on business owners and CEOs, mostly in the lower middle market. Yeah, it was brutal. I hated it, but for some reason I thought, I've got to do this. I thought I'd be there 3 months. 9 years later, I left. And in that time, I worked with 80, 100 companies. I did, my partners did. We saw a lot of them have amazing success, ton of exits, learned so much. So that was that. In that journey, I got to a point where I said, I feel like I'm just solving the same problem all the time. Let me go try something else. So I long story short, there's more to it, but I went to work for a client to run sales. They'd been acquired and now they had new ownership and they said, hey, we really want to throttle down and grow. And we did some good things with that company. If there's time, we can get into it a little bit. But we ended up selling that company. I think we were more lucky than good. We did some good things, but we were lucky. And after we sold, I'm looking around. I'm like, what am I going to do? Really wanted to find a lower middle market company to buy. Was in the process of working through one opportunity, and the deal kind of fell apart for a few reasons. I was blessed because COVID then hit, and I wouldn't have wanted to go through underwriting with a bank during COVID, or take on a company that I didn't know how to run and now had to figure out how to run in COVID. But who knows? So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I've got a wife and 4 kids. I'm thinking they're looking at me like, hey, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, here's what I know to do. I'd been asked to help companies do some training, do some coaching, do a little consulting. So I jumped back into it.
Got it.
And I started to figure out I didn't want to do this massive consulting like McKinsey, and I didn't want to be a fractional manager. Here's what I knew. And so I got back into it as a way to work closely with companies to apply some of what I knew and what I'd learned, but not in an off the shelf way. There's a lot of framework and structure, but to really help people know how to apply this, because a lot of times they go to a training or they go to a seminar or they work with somebody in a public environment with a bunch of other companies, and they're like, well, how do I apply this for me?
Yep.
So that's kind of where I am now, and we've got a little team. There's folks I bring in to work on projects, and we're having a lot of fun working with these CEOs and business owners right now.
Great. Yeah. You know, for the audience that, some of my background, I was a CFO and head of supply chain agribusiness before I eventually started Brady CFO. And, my experience in working with sales teams was, in selling commodities and, fruit, vegetable commodities, et cetera. And it was very relationship driven that, most of the sales team, were full, at least the sales directors, et cetera, were full of people that had been in the industry 20, 30 years and had just developed these longstanding relationships with these buyers that worked at retail markets or wholesalers. And then they would train the next generation. And a lot of it would be go to these shows and develop relationships.
Right.
And as I began, when I started this business and started, helping additional clients, really discovered a lot more about what a real sales strategy, beyond just a relationship driven approach, real sales strategies and how marketing and sales work together, and how you have these follow-ups and these touch points and
Right.
all these other things in regards to even automating some parts of the sales process. And so, help our audience understand, like in a tangible way, Northwood Group, that what do you exactly do? Like, how do you amplify the sales process, and the sales strategy for organizations?
Great question. One of the things I want to do on the front end is do an X-ray on the organization, or an MRI, so to speak. And we look at the actual sales process. And if we need to, we can define what that is. We look at the people, we look at the impact of leadership, we look at how they're positioning themselves and if there's consistency there. And that gives us a lot of information. Why aren't we closing more business? Who are we getting the right people in here? Most companies over-index on industry experience when a lot of it can be taught, not always, but a lot of it. We look at how they're coaching and developing people, because there are real skills needed in sales.
Yep.
And from there, we sit down and say, okay, you know, let's use a football metaphor. I've got some wide receivers, I've got some running backs, got an offensive line, I got a quarterback, and they're all wearing the same jersey. But when we line up on first down, the running back wants to run a running play, the receivers want to go deep, the quarterback wants to throw, but he really wants to throw the passes he's really good at. The offensive line, they want to run block, but everybody's on a different page. And companies will say we're all on the same page, or they want to believe they are. But if you were really to go to every rep in a sales organization and start to unpack what they do on a deal by deal basis, it's wildly different. Their definitions of qualification are different. How they move things through is different. So it makes forecasting hard. So we work on, let's get the process right.
Yep.
Let's get the process right. And let's make sure management is committed to holding people accountable to executing the process. Then we work with managers to make sure they know this is what our people need to do. We're going to hold them accountable and we're going to coach and develop them beyond, hey, let's wait 20 years and you'll have relationships and you'll sell a lot. Then we train the team on how to execute the process. We train the team to have the skills. Now, there's a little piece of this that you referenced that a lot of people that's often missing. And one of the things we sometimes need to do is match your approach to your market. And what I mean by that is not, well, it's a relationship business. That's easy to say if you've been around a long time and had a lot of relationships. But if you're running this agribusiness and you're like, we need to grow by 22% next year for X reasons, we need to have a plan to do that rather than hoping these deals are going to hit.
Yep.
Now, we need to look at the size of the business. We need to look at the competition. We need to look at where you're positioned. But if there's 10,000 potential customers, we have one approach. If there are 400 potential customers, there's a different approach. And we need to figure that out. We need to figure out who our buyer is and how we're going to connect with them. And then we need to hold people accountable to actually going to do it. Sometimes it's a philosophy change and a mindset change, but a lot of it is figuring out what needs to happen, how we're going to do it. And you and I both know one of the best tools in our toolkit as consultants is we just take something we learned in one industry and drop it over here. And now they have a competitive advantage.
Adam, really appreciate that feedback on, all the different things that ultimately Northwood Group, focuses on in regards to helping sales teams and helping organizations improve their sales. But, a lot of companies, they're facing complexity in their sales process, or they're looking at how do they improve and they're worried about complexity. So, you're known for helping companies simplify their sales processes. What are some common complexities that you've seen that hinder sales growth, and how do you address them?
So this is a great question. Do you remember the movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck in the late 90s?
All the way, man. That wasn't it. It was Aerosmith's daughter in that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Liv
yeah,
Tyler. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
I still cry when I see that movie. So there's a scene when they bring in Harry Stamper. Bruce Willis plays Harry Stamper. He's known for being able to drill anything possible. And they basically say, we need you to go to the moon, go to this asteroid, drill a hole, plant a nuke, get off. And they show him the shuttle where they've put a drill on it, or they show him the drill, and he's looking at their version of his drill. And there's a scene that I love. He's just grabbing parts and like, what is this? We don't need this. So here's what I've seen companies do. I've seen a 19-stage sales process. You don't need 19 stages. Your people aren't going to remember 19 stages, nor are they going to do them. You don't need a lot of complexity. You need to be thorough, but that doesn't mean complicated. I've seen companies with 10 different sales processes. Now imagine, you've got, let's pretend you're a big company. You've got a chief revenue officer, or there's several VPs under that, several managers. 10 different sales processes, maybe it's different business units, different products. That's going to be almost impossible to accurately forecast. It's going to be impossible to coach against, to train, to get some uniformity. So those are some of the biggest ones. Really, the biggest mistake is companies think about process the wrong way. So they build it around events and not actually getting information and confirming that there's really an opportunity there. So that's the biggest mistake. But people over-engineer these things all the time. They've got marketing steps in there. They've got research. And it's like, no. It's really these handful of steps that move a deal through to qualified. So that's what's usually missing just in terms of how sales is done.
What would you say that, some of those handful of steps are that what should our audience really be thinking about? Like, what are the top steps that really do help help a deal move forward?
So I was talking to a friend of mine. He is at a company that is valued several $1 billion. He's running a sales team of 20. He rolls up to a VP who rolls up to the president and the chief revenue officer. And he and I were discussing what makes things really effective in a sales, just the selling environment. By and large, the most important thing is early discovery. And For some people, that's a stage. I like to see that it is a stage, whatever you call it. But that is the one where you need to find out not just the need, but if they actually have a reason to buy and buy from you. It needs to be thorough. It needs to be expansive. It needs to be a deep discussion. And most salespeople don't do that. Now, there's somebody listening to this and they're like, well, I do it, or my people do it. Well, the truth is, it's usually not done well. I've been in this space for almost 20 years, and I'm still astounded at how poorly it's done and how little information a salesperson can give to a manager or a CFO on where an opportunity is. So I look at, well, let's make this really simple. You find somebody who wants to talk to you, who fits your profile, and they want to talk to you about something that's in, the world of problems you solve. That's the first step. That's the first stage. The second one is there an opportunity here? Meaning, is there a case for us to do business with them? The third step is, do they have the ability to buy? Meaning, we're with the right people, they're committed to solving the problem, they're willing, and this is going to scare people in commodities worlds, to spend a little bit more to do it with us. We know how they're going to make a decision. And then there's the closing, which is the most overrated aspect of selling, because if you do all those other things prior to that, the closing actually becomes easy. And so there might be some post-close account management. There probably should be, but those are typically the stages. I mean, it's find the right person, build the case, make sure they have the ability to buy, and then you do the closing piece. So it's 4. We might go to 5 or 6 with some companies, but never more.
Got it. Makes complete sense that, yeah. I was reading a sales book the other day and just talking about how much time your sales team can be spending working on the wrong prospects, where like you've talked about doing these demos and it doesn't really get you anywhere. And so all of a sudden you've staffed up and you've gotten this huge bloated sales organization,
Yep.
when you could probably do it with less people. If you do more of this pre-qualification, understand, is there really a problem that you all can solve here? And are you talking to the right people? So it makes complete sense that.
On that, here's a thought for your listeners. And the biggest way, the fastest way, the simplest way for a CEO or business owner to double sales. This is simple, but it's hard. They need to make sure that there's enough activity to create opportunities or conversations. And then they need to make sure that their people are having early conversations about business issues with someone who can make a decision or matters. If you do those things and you get your messaging right, you're going to close a lot of business. But what happens is there's usually not enough activity. They're usually talking to the wrong people who are too low to make a decision. And the messaging is all about, here's our solution, not here's the thing you're thinking about that you care about.
Yeah. I relate it to even our CFO business, Brady CFO, that, some of the things that we've learned is, if we're not talking to the business owner, then we're not talking to the right person in terms of, who will actually make the decision for our services. We need to talk to the business owner, and then a couple other pre-qualifiers. If they've had a full-time CFO in their business, that it's not going to be a fit, that,
Right.
we are providing part-time services, and we've come to the conclusion that, hey, part-time CFO services don't fit an organization that has gotten used culturally to full-time services, unless they have scaled back in an immense way. And for us, that having some of those qualifying questions and making sure that we understand that on the first call, and we're not wasting time following up and doing things, that it's critical. And so, yeah, it makes complete sense. I'd love to understand more. We talked about in the beginning, in the intro, that you've helped your clients double their close rates.
Right.
What are the strategies or changes you implement to achieve this?
So this is most easily achieved in a very transactional environment where there's a lot of volume, because you don't need massive changes to do that. So in this environment, this organization, all we really did was we analyzed what was happening on their calls. So I think I got a sample size of 6 calls, and you quickly recognize the pattern, right? They talked too much about themselves. They didn't ask the right questions. They didn't connect with the person. They didn't listen. They were rushing the call because they were worried they were going to go too long. And they weren't even asking for the business. It was sort of a, well, here's a link if you want to do something.
Got it.
So I restructured the flow of the call, and we then started training the people how to execute it. It was that, I mean, I need to make it sound more complex so I sound smarter, but most people are kind of rushing through the call and they're focused on all the wrong things when they're selling. They think if you get on the phone with them, you want to hear all about them. Most buyers want to talk about themselves.
Yep.
So we did that. It took about 5 months. They'd been converting a raw close, like from lead to close. It was like 18%. We got them to about 32%. And then they boosted, they increased prices and the close rate stayed solid. So
Yep.
that's what we've done there. In other organizations, what we've done is we've simply focused them on the deals they can actually win. So if you think about Charlie Munger, he talks a lot about inversion, invert. Well, a lot of times in sales, you say, well, who can we go get? What we don't think about is who are we not going to win, right? Financially, if you could just say, who's going to cost us money, you just wouldn't sell to those people in theory. But with sales, a lot of times we waste a lot of precious resources chasing business we are not going to win, but no one wants to admit it. So one of the things we do is we say, we're going to score an opportunity to determine if we should even pursue it. And it's going to be very painful for everybody because you're going to realize we have a lot fewer deals we can actually win than we realize. I'll tell you, for your clients who fill out RFPs, unless they've written it, by and large, I tell them, just don't respond. Because if you didn't help write it, if you didn't initiate it, you're probably not going to get it. You're going to spend a lot of time on a deal that you're not. Let's just focus on the ones you're going to win.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I've heard that advice before too, that the moment that, especially depending upon the services you're providing, but yeah, the moment that you're asked to fill out an RFP, that yeah, it's a loose game at that point. That
It really
you're
is.
getting bid out, and you want to be in an environment to where, how do I say, there's always going to be competition in your sales environment, but you're not going up against the bidding process, that you actually are adding value through the sales process and trying to close that customer. And it's not just going to come down to price at the end of the day, that on that RFP, et cetera, which that, if somebody has you fill out the RFP, it really is coming down to a decision of just who's the best on price. And it's like, well, then what was the point of the entire sales process
Right.
of trying to discover, trying to learn things? So it makes complete sense. Help us understand too, you've helped companies increase their prices by 15%. That, a lot of companies in today's environment that, they have, lagging bad overhead rates, operating costs,
Yeah.
from these inflationary environments, and they feel like they haven't been able to pass those along to their customers. And so I see, personally, a lot of clients that they've had shrunk margins, versus where they were 2 to 3 years ago, and it's just really painful, and they need to figure out how to raise their prices. And so you've helped companies raise their prices by as much as 15%. Walk us through how you've done that. What does that look like?
Well, I'm not a pricing expert. Let me say that first. The guy to talk to about this and to follow is a guy named Per Sioforce. He's wrote a book. I think it's called The Price Whisperer, and I've gotten to know Per, and he's brilliant. I've brought him into organizations to have him speak. He's really good. So here's ultimately the organization needs to figure out: do we have the opportunity to raise prices, and can we do it effectively? What you run into, here's the biggest barrier. It's the belief on the sales team that it's a price game
Yep.
and that we can't do it. So routinely, I'll deal with sales leaders who were really effective salespeople. And so that's how they got in a leadership role. And they have a really strong mindset on price. They're like, we can sell this for more. And they have a lot of conviction. But what they'll tell me is, and this is a phrase I've learned in the last couple of years, they'll say, our salespeople are selling out of their own pocket, meaning I'm selling you based on what I believe about money. And
Yep.
so let's say I'm being told to sell this at 100 grand. I think that's a lot of money. You give me a little bit of resistance. And so I'm looking for a way to discount, or I'm telling the company it's about price. In other scenarios, I've seen enterprise sales reps who are making mid six figures.
Yep.
go back to their company and say, we need to discount, we need to negotiate to close this. What they're really saying is, we need to give them a unilateral concession. Now, what did I say was the most important stage in the sales process? It's discovery and finding a reason to buy.
Yep.
If that's done well and they can quantify what's at stake, and when I say quantify, it's not pull out this calculator that marketing created to say, here's your ROI, because no one believes it. But if they can have a conversation about what's at stake and they see you or your company as different, a lot of people are willing to spend just a little bit more to get it done right and get it done right the first time with you. Because we've all bought something to save a few bucks and gotten ourselves in a bad way. But the biggest thing with raising prices is the conviction that you can actually do it.
Makes sense that it goes back to the RFP discussion, right? It relates back to that you really want to be in that pre-discovery, or I shouldn't say pre-discovery, but that discovery phase of really understanding what their pain points are and the value that your business or organization brings, and to make sure that that value is really seen up front and close to it. And that way you're not getting into just a bidding war at the end and filling out
Right.
RFPs and having to figure out how to discount. Like it's where you want to avoid that. And so to your point, so much has to be done on the front end in regards to discovery. Walk us through that a little bit, Adam. That I'd love to understand. Like, what's a really good discovery call? What does that consist of? What does that look like?
So let's pretend you and I are talking and you're CEO of a middle market company. And in my world, you're telling me you want to talk to me, or I've reached out to you, something's happened, and we're going to have a conversation about sales. Most people would say, let me tell you about us. And then they would start to give you, here's what we do, here's who we've done it for, here's how we can help you. Now, let's pretend they're a little better than that. What they'll probably do, and I would do if I were just a little bit better than that, I'd say, hey, let me ask you a few questions. Is this a problem? Is this a problem? Or I might even say, what did you want to talk about today? If I'm even better than that, I will listen. I'll probably ask 3 to 5 questions. And then I will quickly move to what if we could, what if we could, what if we could, and I present. What a really good discovery call looks like, let's pretend it's me and you. I'm probably going to say, hey, Mason, why are we here today? What are you trying to do? And what I'm going to do is look for what you believe is going on. And then I'm going to start to figure out what's really going on. The Challenger sale was all the rage like 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And I might challenge your thinking, but what I'm looking for missing pieces in the conversation, things you didn't bring up that we should be talking about. In my case, you might say sales are lagging or you want training, but I want to know about your lead flow. I want to know about conversions. I want to know about opportunity cost, how it's affecting you, why you need to grow, what you've tried. And then I'm starting to poke holes where there are some issues. And it's me just asking a lot of questions. And people will hear that and they'll say, oh, just ask open-ended questions. No, no, no. You need to ask the right questions in the right order. I want to know why you care, why everything you've done has been insufficient, what you thought about, why you need to do this. And then we need to start to figure out what's at stake for you, for the company financially, if you don't do anything. And then we're starting to look at what this costs and if there's even any urgency. And I want to eliminate other things you've tried. I want to eliminate the way you've thought about things that are like not a great fit. And if we've done that, it's probably 50 or 60 questions. And it's probably a 30, 40-minute conversation. And at that point, I'm going to know a ton about you. There would still be more I could ask, but I should be able to then move to the next stage because we know what's at stake. We know you need to do something. We know why you need to do something. We know why you would want to do it with me and what the limitations are elsewhere. And we'd have a sense of, what we're going to do. We're going to have an idea of what needs to be done. That's so rarely done. And it's honestly where I spend a lot of time just training salespeople and coaching them and coaching managers this is the key success factor.
Yep. Yeah. It's as you were kind of walking through some of those example questions, it's interesting because their responses to it would literally be them cementing, like the client or prospective client would be cementing why they reached out to you in the first place and why you are the potential solution provider to their problem. Like you're cementing it through that sequence of questions that you're not having to tell them, they're coming to that conclusion on their own. And I think we all know that, as much as we would love to say that, hey, we listen to our spouse when they give us a piece of advice or give us feedback and all this stuff, right? Like even to the people that we love the most, we don't listen. That it, we can be so stubborn, and we have to actually get it ourselves. Like we have to walk through it ourselves. And so, I love that of it's really helping that prospective client cement, that idea themselves and come to fruition that this is what I need here. I'm looking for what Adam or, this person is providing because they walked me through this.
Well, and this probably happens in your business. A lot of times, there are a lot of consequences. There's a lot that they're thinking about that they've either not verbalized or gone to the
Yep.
next logical conclusion of. And
Yep.
so, what I'm trying to do is get them to go from here's what I think I need to here's what's really going on to here's how I feel about it to here's why I can't do these other things. And if you do that well, people will have discoveries, their own personal discoveries, and a conversation with you that they haven't had before.
Yep.
When that happens, they realize you're the one who can help me.
Yeah. And I think there's just such an opportunity for more value. I going back to like, conversations that even we have in the sales process, somebody comes and says, hey, I really need cash flow forecasting. And it's like, okay, well, let's walk this back. Why do you need cash flow forecasting? And it's because you have a cash flow issue.
Right.
Well, it would be far better for us, while we can do cash flow forecasting, it would be far better for us to figure out how to resolve those cash flow issues. And we want to get to the root of actually resolving those rather than just focusing on cash flow forecasting, that it's about fixing the problem. And if we don't ask the right questions and we just say, oh, yeah, we can do cash flow forecasting,
Right.
we haven't really solved a deeper problem, and we really haven't shown our value either. And so by us asking those questions, well, why do you need it? What would you say is causing your biggest cash flow concern? If we know enough about their industry, we can go deeper. And so, yeah, makes complete sense.
Let me say this because you've probably got people listening to this who are in distribution, they're in manufacturing, they're in insurance. It sounds like you and I are having a conversation about services,
Yep.
but all of this applies to commodities markets. I work with traders. This applies to distributors of tooling or medical equipment. This applies to, people in manufacturing who have to go sell widgets, right? Everybody kind of bags on widgets. They're like, we don't sell widgets. Well, selling widgets is freaking hard,
Yeah.
right? Because it's incredibly competitive. So no matter what industry you're in, these processes apply. Now, it needs to probably be adjusted or tailored for you, but same stuff applies.
Same thing that, we work with a lot of construction clients as an example. And there's no reason that this couldn't apply, that at the end of the day,
Yes.
that when you take more time in this discovery and really try to seek out what are they looking for, what are they trying to accomplish with this project or this build, that you can get a heck of a lot more insight, and you can add, some sweet things into, either the proposal or actually what you deliver, and get a great review that then carries you on. And I think we all know that there's so many, say, I'm using this as an example. There's so many general contractors or subcontractors where the review, the testimonial is the biggest thing in the world. And so if you can understand what they're really looking for and deliver and exceed those expectations, all of a sudden you have a raving review that gets you additional business. But you have to ask the right questions in the first place.
So let me give you a quick story on that. We've built a house, we've remodeled a house. The first time we built, here's what I cared about. I cared about the cash flow, not the total price. And with the mortgage guy, I cared about cash flow, not the total price, right? What's going to be the payment? Because that's what I need to manage. Neither of them ever found those things out, right? Then when we remodeled a home, I had a budget in mind. They came in way above that budget. And what they did is he started trying to discount. And I remember I had to tell the builder, I was like, look, don't cut this down because I'd rather be mad at you now than mad at you later. But he needed to have that conversation. He's needed to be the one to say, look, here's what we can do. I can cut it now and we're going to go over because this is building. There are all these things that you can't anticipate. And it's not me. I mean, I'm like, I'm going to do the work. We're going to pull up these floors and find something we didn't know. But a lot of people don't have the guts to have that conversation. To your point about reviews, we've recommended that builder to so many people because our project was just bang, 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 bang. They stayed on top of it. They communicated really well. And if you can do that when you're selling, whether to a consumer or a business, you can say, hey, look, you're pushing back on my price. You don't have to work with us. But if you want it on time, you want it communicated well, and you've got enough experience with builders to know who can execute and who can't, right? They can have that conversation. But most just won't because they believe it's only about price.
I think about it that here in Houston, we went through a hurricane recently, and hurricanes tear down fences pretty darn fast. That I'm thinking about starting a fencing company, Adam.
You should.
But yeah, fencing goes down pretty fast as well as roofing. But yeah, I had two different parts of my fence line, one with a backyard neighbor and then one with a side neighbor. And definitely the one with the side neighbor had a bigger issue with it, just more fence line went down. And so I'd have people come and, offer a quote. And we live in an HOA, and I told him that, hey, I'm concerned because the neighbors, I mean, we're going to have to split price, and they're I was less price conscious, but they were very price conscious. And so I said, as I'm getting these quotes, that, hey, price is a concern here, that we want to make sure that we do the right thing, and we get something competitive here. And it wasn't until one of the fencing companies said, well, your HOA has a standard for fencing, and what if we did that in the front, but in the back where nobody has any eyeballs on that, hey, what if we use these materials instead? And the fence will be just as sturdy. It's not using the preferred HOA materials in terms of consistency. And we could even have it a little bit shorter, et cetera. And for them, they could have cut the price down on that and probably made more margin on that as a result of just bringing the price down a little bit less than everybody else quoting just according to HOA guidelines. But they just asked a question that nobody else was asking and creative about it.
Bingo. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard.
And I mean, they understood that price was a concern. And so they asked enough questions to try to arrive at that destination that, hey, it wasn't just, well, do you want this? Do you want that? And it's like, well, the way that they asked the question too wasn't, hey, do you prefer this? Do you want cedar? Do you want pine? It's not just about, to your point, it's not just about asking open-ended questions. It's about asking the right questions, that trying to attack and understand, what's important to them. So the way they phrased the question was, hey, in order to get the price down, maybe we don't use the materials that your HOA is desiring. Would that be preferable to you? Rather than just, hey, do you want to use pine or cedar here? Cedar's more expensive,
And they didn't make a unilateral concession. They didn't say, we're going to eat it and take it off our margin. They said, hey, look, you want a lower price. What if you gave this up? Because when I work with people, I remember I was in a meeting with a couple guys, and they were like, hey, can you cut our price? I said, happy to. What do you want to take out?
Exactly.
And both of them looked at each other like, how do we get our salespeople to do that? Hey, I'll cut it.
That's a great answer. Yeah, that is such a great answer. Well, what do you want to take out? Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, Adam, I really appreciate all of your insight into sales strategies here, process design, learning so much about that discovery phase. I think that a key takeaway for our audience is to have a successful discovery call meeting phase to really make sure that you understand that client's potential pain points, but ask the right questions too. And you and I were talking about it even before this podcast started, that you worked with a company that was doing close to $500 million in sales, looking to add between 80 to $100 million in sales over the course of next year. Yeah. And the CEO would listen in on sales calls and give feedback at a company that size. And so I think for our audience, that discovery phase is incredibly important, but make sure that you're actually training and you're giving feedback and coaching in regards to the right questions to ask. How could you have tweaked that a little bit better? And that third party perspective is so important. And Adam, I really would love to understand, for our audience that, we're talking lower middle market business owners and service providers like yourself. What's the number one piece of advice that you give to CEOs or owners in the lower middle market who are looking to accelerate their company's growth and create lasting value?
So I tell them, from a revenue perspective, you cannot abdicate responsibility and ownership for sales. No one is going to care as much as you. So you can hire me and I will help you build everything, but I don't own your company and I'm not going to be there every day. You can
Yep.
hire a manager, and that manager needs to be a crackerjack who is on it, and you have to stay attached to them at the hip, not micromanaging them, but making sure they're driving it forward. CEOs that I work with, when they don't succeed, it's because they wanted to write a check and have the problem go away rather than own it and say, I'm going to create this culture. I'm going to have these standards. I'm going to hold people accountable. And they lead from the front. So the company I was telling you about, it was the president, not the CEO. But that president just says, this is our expectation. And you're going to see that it's our expectation because I'm giving, that company sells $1 million deals. That particular president would listen to sales calls for $8,000 deals and he would give feedback. What does that communicate? That says this matters and we care. Larry Ellison at Oracle, long after he was a billionaire, was known for getting involved in sales calls and moving things forward. That's the standard.
Yep. And I think even, yeah, this applicability in the lower middle market. I mean, we talked, that example was a $500 million company, and that is amazing of that emphasis that that president was so involved in the processes and the coaching and making sure that people understood that this was important. And if they said it was important, that they were going to show that it was important, right?
Absolutely.
But to your point, and I would absolutely agree with that, that especially in the lower middle market value, that oftentimes we're talking about companies roughly between 5-50 million, give or take. You cannot fully delegate out sales. You can delegate out particular functions of the sales process. You cannot delegate out sales responsibility.
Or
That
accountability, right?
Yes, or accountability, that you still have to be involved in this. Not to say that you need to be on every sales call or you need to be leading every conversation. You need to have team members that do that for you and to delegate processes and functions to it. But in terms of the design, in terms of the process in regards to the strategy, you still need to be very involved in it. And to your point that in order to have success, you can't just write a check and make it go away. You can't just go hire a VP of sales and all of a sudden we're supposed to have great business development. You still need to be involved. It's just you need to identify how to improve your processes, how to fit the right people into the process, and make sure that the process is simple. Would you agree, Adam?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate your time and that, yeah, sales and revenue growth is such a consistent theme amongst our
I bet.
clients as to how do they improve it. So just really appreciate your input here. Tell the audience how they can figure out more about you.
Sure. I post photos of my kids and I talk a little bit about sales and sometimes college football on LinkedIn so they can follow me there. I'm Adam P. Boyd. And they can reach out to me. I'm Adam at the northwoodgrp.com, not group, but grp.com.
Great.
And welcome to come to my website. We've got there's a lot of resources. There's a newsletter there that we drop that every 2 weeks or so, and that's the northwoodgrp.com. So love to hear from folks. And if I can't help, I'll usually have someone who can.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. But before we leave, tell me who's going number one all the way to the national championship this year in college football?
Oh, God.
You're in Austin, so are you going Longhorns on us or okay?
No, I'm a
Okay, that's
Tennessee
right.
guy.
That's
I'm
right.
from
You're from
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
So I here's oh man, I could talk about this all day. It's really going to come down because of a playoff. It's going to come down to your roster depth. And so it's really hard to pick against either Georgia or Ohio State because of how
Yep.
deep they are. I'm going to guess Ohio State has a much more favorable schedule than Georgia because, Big Ten, they're not in the SEC. So I just upset everybody in the Midwest.
I'm in Houston, but I'm going to go for Oregon this year. So, yep.
Good for you. All
Great,
right.
man. Yeah. Well, thank you, Adam. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, great being with you, Mason. Thank you so much.